Hi, I'm Josh Bernstein. I'm in the Peruvian Andes on my way to the land of the ancient Chachapoya. Deadly enemies of the mighty Inca.
You think they really ripped the heads off of people?
They were notoriously vicious warriors. Yet in the 16th century, the Chachapoya suddenly disappeared. I'm on a quest to discover one of the greatest but least known cultures in the world, and to reveal how these fearsome warriors could simply vanish. High in the Andes of northern Peru, in forests above the clouds, lie the secrets of an ancient tribe of warriors known as the Chachapoya. The earliest records of the tribe date to roughly 500 AD. Eventually, more than 300,000 Chachapoya ruled over 25,000 square miles. In the 16th century, they mysteriously disappeared and history basically forgot them. What we do know about the Chachapoya is that they thrived in South America from the 6th century till sometime in the 16th century AD. But there's a lot that isn't known. We don't even know what they really look like. We have just one image of them from 1615. Found in a manuscript by a native Andean, written not long after they disappeared. And even the meaning of their name is uncertain. Nicknamed the Cloud Warriors, the best explanation is that this referenced the incredible landscape the Chachapoya inhabited. But they did leave behind something pretty extraordinary: the remote mountaintop fortress of Kuelap. It's here that I hope to start my investigation into what happened to these ancient people and what caused them to disappear.
Getting closer. Also getting higher. The Andes mountain range is second only to the Himalaya in terms of height. Many of its peaks tower over 20,000 feet. Kuelap sits in the middle, roughly 10,000 feet, which means if you're coming here directly from sea level, you can feel it. And here it is, Kuelap.
Discovered in 1843, Kuelap is a remarkable feat of engineering. With walls 60 feet high, stretching nearly 2,000 feet long, it's one of the largest stone structures in South America. It's many centuries older than Machu Picchu, the home of Peru's most famous empire builders, the Inca. But the Inca didn't rise to prominence until the 1300s. That's 800 years after the rise of the Chachapoya. It's only now that the secrets of the Chachapoya are being uncovered. Archaeologist Alfredo Narvaez has been excavating the ruins of Kuelap for the last 20 years. He's one of only a handful of Chachapoya experts in the world. Can we go for a tour of Kuelap?
Yes, of course. Let's go.
Excellent. You lead, I'll follow. So these circles here are what? Are these ceremonial homes? Pits?
No, these are the dwellings.
Dwellings?
All these are the rounded houses. These are typical architecture of the Chachapoya civilization.
So if I saw this on the side of a hut in a jungle, Chachapoya lived there.
Yes. We think that in this place we're living at least 3,000 or 4,000 people.
Yeah, that's a pretty big
Yes.
community.
Yes.
Significant community.
It was the largest community in all this area.
The view gets better and better.
Yes.
But it wasn't just the view that made Kuelap's location so desirable. Certainly being up here, you have a pretty commanding view of the landscape,
Yes.
right? I mean, no one's gonna be able to sneak up on you if you can see them from up here on this stone wall. The Chachapoya were warriors, and typically built on high ground as a defensive position. But proof of a deeply spiritual side has also been found at Kuelap. Alfredo tells me that the Chachapoya worshipped sacred places and objects, such as mountains, lakes, and boulders. Kuelap was built on a mountain ridge that was considered sacred because of its alignment with a nearby lake that was equally revered. Obviously, a tremendous amount of work went into bringing the stone up here, building these structures. There's no questioning that Kuelap was tremendous significance to the Chachapoya.
Yes, this was the most important religious place.
The Chachapoya also had a strong relationship with their dead, and it was an honor to be buried here. But Alfredo says there was no cemetery at Kuelap. They live with their dead?
They live with their dead. Each dwelling has a burial. We can see a lot of burials in the wall, in the exterior wall. All the exterior wall of this place is full of burials.
But even
So,
now,
even
still
now,
there.
it's still there.
Skeletons have been found beneath the floors of homes and wedged into walls. These bones were uncovered when some walls collapsed. But Alfredo tells me that one of the biggest breakthroughs in Chachapoya research was the discovery of bodies that had been mummified. Recently, a precious cache of 8 well-preserved Chachapoyan mummies were found in a remote location called the Mayuksha Cave. Since the Chachapoya didn't leave us any written records, we can only work off the physical clues they left behind, their bodies. I'm hoping this discovery can shed some light on how one of the most remarkable cultures in the world could suddenly drop off the map. I'm using a horse to get up to this next site. I'm going to go see an archaeologist who specializes in preserving and conserving Chachapoyan mummies. But to get to her, 5 hours by horse. To reach the mummies, I'm climbing to 8,000 feet above sea level.
Arriba, fuerte, 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 arriba! Going up. Woo. Oh, look at that. That was good. We did well. All right, we dallied a little. Yeah, we dallied a lot. 6 hours. But he took the scenic route, that's why.
Waiting to greet me is archaeologist Dr. Sonia Guillen.
It is wonderful to have you. It's an exciting place also, so
Yeah.
I think we'll have fun. Right now that almost all of them
From here, I wouldn't even know there is a cave.
be ready for a surprise.
Sonia's team has discovered a cave that they believe served as a cathedral, a religious space of enormous importance in Chachapoya culture. It's deep.
Deep
Headlamps.
headlamps on.
This was another sacred site. And just like at Kuelap, the Chachapoya honored their dead by placing them here.
It seems that they used every crevice around here, every hole, small caves within the cave to deposit the bones of the people of this community, of everybody who was connected to this ritual place.
But it's not the skeletons that make this cave unique. Sonia and her team hit the archaeological jackpot when they discovered 8 mummies on the ledge above us. Now, exposed to the elements, it's a race against time to keep these mummies and the secrets they hold from deteriorating.
And that's what you're doing right now, is removing these burials
Yeah.
and conserving them.
Yeah.
With this breakthrough discovery, information on who the Chachapoya were and evidence of their disappearance could be at my fingertips. So Sonia has allowed me to do a recovery of a mummy. I gotta put on some protective gear, gloves, because there could be thorns in the burial site, and this is to protect my hands. It's not a hygienic thing really, but this is. I have to wear a mask because the moisture in my breath could affect the mummy. There you go. Good. This mummy has not been moved since it was placed here,
Never.
ever. So, right. This way? Oh my lord.
Hold it against you.
Yep. Okay. This is really weird. Okay. And then it goes here. Evidence of mummification in the Chachapoya culture is extremely rare. This mummy's already missing its head. One false move on my part, and this fragile mummy could fall to pieces. That's good. Está bien? That's good.
Perfecto.
Perfecto. Oh, well, I tell you what, holding the mummy, that's weird. But it's also this magical connection with the sacred space and the obviously once living being, and whew, glad that went well. The mummification process has preserved much of the ancient corpse, and Sonia is eager to study the specimens we've just recovered. we now have to safely transport them on horseback to Sonia's lab. Okay, so we've got our mummy. Oh, not so tight, not so tight. No problem, okay, no problem. We've got the mummy here, padded, protected, and now secured to the top of this animal, who we trust with its transport 3 hours, where it'll then make its way to the museum for analysis. And that analysis will soon unlock some of the darkest secrets of this mysterious civilization. I'm traveling through the Andes, investigating the disappearance of perhaps one of the greatest forgotten cultures in the world. Ancient Peru's deadly Chachapoya tribe. I now have some unusual cargo that may help unravel who these fearsome warriors were and why they vanished. Chachapoyan mummies. This is one of the mummies we've taken from the cave to the Lemebamba Museum. Miguel and I are very carefully walking it in because we want it to arrive as safe as possible.
I'll survive.
So little is known about the Chachapoya that each of the mummies helped Sonia begin to piece together who these people were. Unlike the mummy I recovered, this one still has its head. Just looking at this with a cursory glance, what can you tell me about this person?
I think we are dealing with a male individual based just on the morphology of the head and the size of the legs. The nose was broken at some point. See how the bones have fused here and sort of dented. He died young. We can see it in the pelvis, shows that this individual probably was about 30, 35 years old. In general, we are finding very tall individuals, like 5'8". Yeah.
So this Chachapoya could be here.
Yeah.
Muscular, do we know?
Lean. Lean but muscular. Being lean but strong, I think, and that's what you need to be to live here.
Sure, just part of the environment. Analysis of the bodies we retrieved is at a very early stage. But other mummies in the museum have provided gruesome clues about the Chachapoya culture. Sonia and I are now in the main repository of the museum, and we are surrounded by mummies. Sonia has discovered that the Chachapoya didn't embalm their dead like the Egyptians. To help preserve the mummies, both the temperature and humidity in this room are carefully controlled. How many do you have in here?
231.
Many of the Chachapoyan mummies have been found wrapped in sacks with patterns of crude faces embroidered on them. And what's the significance of the faces on these?
Well, this is a pattern that we only find among these Chachapoya mummies.
Oh, babies.
The two that we found newborn and 1 month old.
It's amazing. While examining many of the mummies to determine how these Chachapoya died, Sonia discovered something disturbing.
This was a surprise, but we have a pattern. We need to explore further. We have a very young woman, swollen eyes. To the right, a very tiny fracture.
Cause of death?
Cause of death.
Major blow to the skull.
Yeah. We found 2 other similar cases.
Both with swollen eyes and a hematoma.
I think in these cases we are dealing with sacrifices.
Ritual human sacrifice.
Ritual human sacrifices.
This is the first evidence ever discovered that suggests ritual human sacrifice among the Chachapoya. Sacrificial offerings in ancient tribes are generally connected with some form of worship. So I've returned to Kuelap, the Chachapoya's spiritual center. But archaeologist Alfredo Narvaez has found evidence of a different kind of offering.
This is the main temple at the side.
Alfredo believes this 1,500-year-old temple at Kuelap was the most sacred religious site for the entire Chachapoyan civilization. The top of this temple was a ceremonial platform for music and dancing. But deep inside the temple, Alfredo made a grim discovery.
This is the only one entrance for the inner part of the temple.
Okay. Today, it's empty, but Alfredo says it wasn't when he first discovered it.
This section was completely full. It was not empty. This inner part was full of human bones and some animal bones and some other kind of offerings.
Human bones.
Yes, we have found a lot of human bones here.
So the ceremonies would be up here, and then the offerings and any sacrificial contributions went down there.
Yes.
Why don't we get rigged and go down? We'll make ourselves the offerings. Since the offerings have been removed, we have the rare opportunity to explore inside. But that's easier said than done. Yep. Without rigging, I wouldn't be able to climb down this 25-foot drop. I can barely fit through the tiny opening.
Narrow. Chachapoya, small? Okay, here we
The
go.
Chachapoya obviously had no intentions of living humans entering here.
Almost there. Oh, okay, wait. A few more meters. There you go.
Come on down, Alfredo!
Okay.
This pit once held enough bones to completely fill this space to the top. Of all the bones you found in this pit, how many humans?
We don't know exactly, but I think that is more than 100.
I didn't realize it'd be that many. More than 100.
More than 100.
Any way to know if they were Chachapoya or not?
I think that probably these are Chachapoya's people.
Alfredo tells me that he has his own theory on why these bones were here, and it's not ritual human sacrifice.
I think that these are part of secondary burials, but as an offering to the core of the religious place, the most important temple for the Chachapoya's people.
The Chachapoya who lived outside of Kuelap would bring the bodies of their dead here. It was considered a great act of worship to inter their loved ones in the sacred mountain fortress. Ritual human sacrifice may well have happened, but there's no evidence at Kuelap so far that substantiates its existence, or that it played any part in the disappearance of the Chachapoya. If this wasn't one of the causes, what could have changed in the world of the Chachapoya towards the end of their days?
We have evidences of Inca occupation here, some offerings of Inca style into this temple too.
Alfredo has provided me with a new lead in my investigation, the Inca. But yet, despite almost 1,000 years of occupation at Kuelap, the only culture that we've seen coming in here, occupying this place and making offerings, were the Inca.
With the Inca, that's correct.
They were obviously a formidable force.
Yes, I think so.
The discovery of Inca offerings is rare evidence that suggests they occupied the precious spiritual hub of the Chachapoya. The Inca were well known as invaders and fought fiercely with many enemies to expand their empire. But why would the Inca set their sights on a territory this isolated and remote? I've explored ancient temples and come face to face with victims of ritual human sacrifice to discover what led to the downfall of one of the most remarkable cultures the world has ever forgotten. The ferocious Andean warriors, the Chachapoya. They were a culture advanced in engineering. The 1,500-year-old mountaintop fortress of Kuelap is believed to have been the center of Chachapoya religion. But by the 1470s, the mighty Inca had started building their own massive stone cities, like Machu Picchu. They began to expand north from Cusco, their capital, and they set their sights on the territory of the Chachapoya. Well, good morning. It's early on a Saturday. I've come to a small town in the highlands where everyone has gathered because it's market day. I think I know who I'm looking for. At the market, I've arranged to meet Chachapoya expert Dr. Inga Schelerud to learn what was so special about their territory.
Oh, hi, Josh.
How are you? Good to
How
see
are
you.
you? Yeah, good to see you too.
Inga tells me that over the centuries, this market town has thrived because of its location.
This is one of the crossroads between the Amazon and the highlands. And the Chachapoyas, of course, are the ones famed for having control, access to all these goods.
So the Chachapoya's location was critical in their success.
It was.
The Chachapoya, she says, controlled a wide variety of foods, but just as importantly, they controlled access to psychotropic plants in the Amazon. The tribe used these plants for mystical healing and spiritual powers.
The Chachapoya people were very good healers, so they knew how to heal people.
And the Inca didn't.
And the Inca didn't. And they are the real threat to the Chachapoya people.
It was the bounty of the Amazon jungle that the mighty Inca wanted for themselves. So if the Inca Empire was strong enough and they could conquer the Chachapoya, they would get the land, they would get the crossroads of trade to the Amazon, and they would get the spiritual power.
Yeah.
And this is why the empire was like, that's what we want. The Chachapoya are our enemy.
Yes.
The Inca waged a massive war to gain control of the Chachapoyan kingdom. But they didn't anticipate how determined the Chachapoya warriors would be to hold on to their sacred land.
So Inga and I are now going for a journey to see exactly what the Inca were up against when they launched their campaign against the Chachapoya.
The Cloud Warriors used this rugged terrain to their advantage.
So here's where the Incas came in the 1470s to a very harsh country with all the steep cliffs and rocks, and the Chachapoyas would hide themselves in ambush.
Really, they'd ambush them. They'd set up traps.
They set up traps, and they would cut off the trails by putting big rocks on them.
Lots of little spaces here, which would be perfect for ambushes. Today, they could be anywhere.
The Chachapoya had a reputation for extreme violence. Inga has brought me to this massive cliff face to show me something that she says proves it.
So here is what I wanted to show you, La Petaca,
And we're going up.
right to the top.
According to Inga, the Chachapoya warriors kept the heads of their victims as trophies. The evidence can be found 1,500 feet up. Getting a close look is so dangerous, only a handful of people have ever explored this site. The only way for us to do it is to rappel down the cliff face. A fall from here would be the equivalent of jumping off the Empire State Building.
Well, as you can tell, we are harnessed, which means we're going over a cliff. This is your first time, isn't it, Inga?
My very first time. I have never done this before in my life.
Ready? Yeah.
Ready.
Okay. Okay, I'm good. It's okay. Okay. You right?
It's a close call, but luckily Inga is okay thanks to our safety gear. Even with our modern equipment, this rappel is challenging, but centuries ago the Chachapoya traversed this cliffside regularly. To honor their dead, they interred the bodies in sacred geological formations, just like at Kuelap.
The Chachapoya sure know how to pick a burial site.
Oh, they did indeed. Also because this is really such a sacred rock, this one.
This was sacred, huh?
Definitely.
La Petaca is located near the convergence of two rivers, something considered sacred by many Andean cultures.
I still don't understand how they got up here.
Probably the same way as we're doing, going down by rope.
You think? You think they had ropes?
Yeah, they did. Because that's the only way to go down there.
It's fantastic. But it's because of time.
After a long descent, we find what we're looking for. This ancient Chachapoyan mural.
Look at that, isn't that just fantastic?
It's wild.
Lots of ruins.
Inga believes it depicts a warrior wearing an antler headdress, ripping the head off of a rival.
So when archaeologists found this, they could interpret this to show just how strong and fierce the Chachapoya were.
That's how we do it.
Do you think they really ripped the heads off of people?
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
We're assuming that this person here is the victor, right?
Right.
The warrior who wins the battle.
Who wins the battle, a very fierce warrior who has got a very special burial here.
The enormous effort it took to build this burial site into the side of the sacred cliff is yet more evidence of the important role that nature and the landscape played in the religion of the tribe. But now, I'm about to find out if these fierce Chachapoyan warriors were able to fend off the Inca, or if they would all die trying. I've unearthed ancient mummies and explored sky-high burial sites in my quest to find out who the Chachapoya were and why they suddenly disappeared more than 500 years ago. Dr. Inga Schillerup tells me that the powerful Inca staged full-scale attacks to conquer the Chachapoya and their valuable territory. So how did the Chachapoya defend themselves? And were the Inca successful in wiping them out? To find out how these warriors measured up, Inga has brought me to a place where we can test their ancient weaponry. The preferred battle weapon of the Chachapoya was the slingshot.
Don Segundo and Don Juan, they have very kindly agreed to show us how they use the sling.
Okay.
Today, local farmers use slingshots to protect their crops from birds.
Sling to protect.
But centuries ago, the Chachapoya used them to kill their enemies.
Well, this is made of
Horsehair.
horsehair, yeah. But the ancient Chachapoyas, it was made by a woven textile.
So this was the iconic weapon of the Chachapoya people.
Yes, it was. And of course, they would be standing high up in the hill. They would use the slings and try to crash the skulls of the enemies.
We know that they could crack the skulls of their enemies.
Yes, we have many skulls with these fractures.
Well, let's give it a try.
The force doesn't come from the constant motion, but from the final swing.
Everybody get the hell away! Which melon, which skull? Nope. Try again. At least I went forward. Ah! Yeah! That's cool. I think I hit a skull.
If I can crack a skull without much practice, it's not hard to imagine the damage an entire army of Chachapoya warriors could have inflicted on the invading Inca.
Look at that. Cracked right in half. And you're saying that if we were to hit one of these skulls, animal skulls are much thicker than human skulls.
Yes, so you can imagine how it would be with a human skull.
If we cracked a human skull, it would have been good night.
Yes.
In the skilled hands of the Chachapoya, the slingshot was deadly. But the encroaching Inca had their own weapon of choice, the mace.
Well, this is an Inca stone mace.
This would crush any part of the bone
Any
that it
part
had.
of the bone, yeah.
So this is primarily a close combat weapon,
Yes, it
right?
is.
Whereas the sling is long range.
Yeah.
The Inca had to come in pretty close.
They did.
Rock against bone. Rock wins.
But Inga tells me the Inca had one crucial advantage over the Chachapoya: strength in numbers. The Inca arrived with around 20,000 warriors.
And yet, despite being outnumbered, the Chachapoya still fought.
They still fought.
Battle after battle, the Cloud Warriors fiercely defended their homeland. But the Inca army kept coming back, bigger and stronger, finally inflicting such a defeat that the Chachapoya laid down their arms. Inga says that in 1470, the Cloud Warriors were conquered, but not slaughtered. The Inca assumed control over the Chachapoya's territory and added the tribe to the growing population of its empire. So if the Chachapoya coexisted with their new Inca rulers, what else could be to blame for their sudden disappearance? I'm heading back to Kuelap, where the lead archaeologist, Alfredo Narvaez, says he has some Chachapoya artifacts that could point the finger at a new suspect.
Oh, Josh, how are you?
I'm back again.
We found some potsherds that are completely different than the local pottery. If you see this type of Chachapoya pots, you can see this is not so fine, not polished, it is not well treated.
Can I hold it?
Yes, of course.
The ceramics Alfredo has found throughout Kuelap are more technologically advanced than typical Chachapoyan pottery. These sophisticated methods indicate the presence of another culture here at Kuelap, the Spanish. So that's actually Chachapoya made, but with Spanish techniques.
That's correct.
So the Spanish and the Chachapoya get along. But this doesn't necessarily mean the Spanish were involved in their disappearance. Is there any other evidence here, cultural evidence, that talks about the interaction of these two worlds?
No, we have not another type of evidence.
Just the pottery.
Just pottery. So if we want to know something more about the history, you have to go to La Jalca.
La Jalca.
It's the first city that the Spanish founded.
25 miles north of Kuelap, the town of La Jalca is the first Spanish settlement in this region, dating back to 1538. Beneath the facade of this dusty old village lie gruesome details about the final days of the Chachapoya. I'm on a quest to discover what caused the disappearance of an ancient Andean civilization, the deadly Chachapoya. So far, I've been able to rule out the Inca as suspects, but a new group has now piqued my interest, the Spanish. It's well known that the Spanish came to South America, but I'm hoping to learn exactly what they did with the Chachapoya. This is the village of La Jalca. I've come here because I'm told they perform a ceremony that captures the meeting of the Chachapoya and the Spanish 500 years ago. Dr. Peter Lerche, an expert on the Chachapoya, has invited me here to witness this strange ceremony. What does this mean?
This is a horse dance. There are 4 persons representing the horses and 1 person in front who is representing the pagan pre-Hispanic man.
With the mask.
With a black mask, yes.
Peter tells me that in 1532, roughly 60 years after the Chachapoya were conquered by the Inca, the Spanish arrived in Peru in search of gold. For the natives, this arrival was shocking. They had never before encountered horses. So we're seeing the Spanish and their horses defeating the natives.
Yes, that's the basic symbolism of this dance.
Led by the infamous Francisco Pizarro, the Spanish explorers captured Incan Emperor Atahualpa and seized control of his empire. These events forced the Chachapoya to make a choice: stand with their Incan rulers to fight the invaders, or join the Spanish to help overthrow their Incan enemies. Peter tells me evidence of their choice can be found here, a small church in the center of town. So what's the story of the church?
This church is the oldest of the whole northeastern Peru, and it was built in 1538.
This is the first
church
in the whole region.
In the whole region.
So Christianity's first footprint was here.
Yes.
And the stonework here. Yeah, it's like the ones at Kuelap. This is where we're seeing the blending of the two worlds.
Yes.
Although the Chachapoya worshipped nature, they helped the Spanish build Catholic churches. Peter says that this shows that Chachapoya had decided to support the Spanish in their conquest of the Inca, perhaps to avenge their defeat decades earlier. But the benefits of this alliance for the Chachapoya were short-lived. They soon found there was a hidden price to pay.
The Spaniards did not bring only good things to the New World. Together with them came bad things too, like the diseases.
Diseases like smallpox, measles, and diphtheria had never existed in South America before the Spaniards, and the Chachapoya had no immunity to defend against them. Hundreds of thousands of natives throughout the region perished. These diseases nearly wiped out the entire Chachapoya tribe. Their population was decimated by 90%. It's a devastating loss, but not enough to wipe them out. However, At the hands of their new Spanish rulers, the fate of the Chachapoya would be even more horrifying. I've traveled throughout Peru to explore what led to the downfall of the Chachapoya civilization. The trail of evidence confirms that the tribe collaborated with the Spanish to overthrow the Inca Empire. But disease from the Old World decimated the Chachapoya population to roughly 20,000 people, and the balance of power began to shift. It was only a matter of time before the Spanish decided to use this situation to their advantage.
The Spanish brought horses, the Spanish brought disease, but they also brought weapons.
I'm now on my way to a blacksmith shop in Lima, where I'm hoping to learn how an army of only a few hundred Spanish soldiers were able to maintain control over the thousands of Chachapoya. Meeting me there is archaeologist Guillermo Koch, known to his friends as Willie.
How are you doing? Good to see you.
Nicolas the blacksmith is making a sword almost exactly as the Spaniards did in the 16th century.
Think that Nicolas would let me give it a shot?
Of course, Nicolas.
Yeah.
Josh.
Willie tells me that the key to the success of the Spanish was preparation.
The Spaniards have to bring everything from Spain, and it was a very long trip. It took practically a year and a half, the round trip.
So an expedition to Peru back then was very much like an expedition to the moon today.
Practically, yeah, more or less.
They had to be completely self-supported.
Yeah, the logistics were very, very important. They have to bring everything.
With these tools and an army of blacksmiths, the Spanish were able to replace any weapons damaged or destroyed during their exploits. Willie explains that the once formidable Chachapoya could not compete with the Spaniards' bottomless supply of artillery. But the biggest shock to the tribe whose own weapon of choice was a sling was the sheer killing power of the Old World weapons.
Do we have anything here that approximates actual flesh and bone?
Yeah, in fact, we have a llama's leg.
Llama's leg?
Yeah.
That's probably as close as we can get to
I think so.
to a human. Yeah? Okay, let's give it a shot.
Exactly what happened with the people, no?
Yeah, she cut through the bone.
Yeah, the legs and the arms were left hanging, no, but with the bone cut through.
So you see this from the Spanish on the battlefields?
Yes, in fact, we have evidence.
Willie has brought skeletal remains thought to be the earliest evidence of Native Americans killed during the Spanish conquest, dating back to 1536 AD.
You can see here the impact of the sword and the fracture that it produced, and the leg was cut like this and was left hanging.
That injury is very much like what we just saw with the llama.
It's exactly like that.
So this fracture was caused by a sword, definitely.
Completely.
We don't see these types of fractures before the Spanish arrived.
No, the Native Americans didn't have weapons that were that sharp.
And the sword wasn't the only deadly weapon in the Spanish arsenal. They also brought guns.
This one is the first positive evidence of a Native American killed by firearm in the.
From one of these?
One smaller than this went through the top of his head and left from the face.
So basically from here out here.
Exactly.
And if he wasn't dead before, he was dead now.
He was.
I would imagine that even though the Chachapoya were probably noble warriors, they must have seen this and been terrified.
Yeah, they have never seen something like this.
But surprisingly, this wasn't the final nail in the Chachapoya coffin.
Willie, if we add up all the factors that the Chachapoya were facing, the Spanish have horses, they have superior weapons, and they bring disease, does this mark the end of the Chachapoya?
More or less, but there is another factor, something that in Spanish is called the reducciones.
In 1572, the Spanish Viceroy of Peru created reducciones, towns designed to hold the defeated natives. The Chachapoya were forced to relocate away from the places they held sacred.
They congregate people from several different villages into small towns.
But Willie, do the chronicles tell us which reducciones the Chachapoya were placed into?
Yes, yes. They describe some of the reducciones, and there is one that is particularly interesting. It's called Levanto.
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 Some of the Chachapoya were placed in Levanto.
Yes, and people are still living there.
So if I wanted to see where the Chachapoya, or some of them, ended up, I could go to Levanto.
Yes, that's an excellent example.
Then I'm going to Levanto.
400 miles to the north, Levanto is a beautiful town with a dark past.
Well, I made it to the town of Levanto, which today looks like a very peaceful place. But according to what Willie said, 500 years ago, that was not the case at all.
He says that the reducciones are a little-known part of the brutal history of the conquistadors. They're rarely talked about. But it's here that I hope to find out what dealt the final blow to the Chachapoya civilization. My guide in Levanto is local historian Edilberto Yoplek, speaking through an interpreter.
So before the reducciones, what was the world of the Chachapoya like before the Spanish changed things?
There were basically 14 populations here of Chachapoya, so 14 villages, and they were put in one place because it was a way of making the domination by the Spanish a lot easier, both politically and with religion.
So this was a normal Chacha Inca settlement, but by putting in the square and the church, the Spanish said, now we can control the people here.
Yes, sí.
I'm told the Chachapoya were forced into hard labor in Spanish mines, sugar mills, and sweatshops to pay exorbitant tributes demanded by the victors. But it could be said that the killer blow for the Chachapoya was not physical, but spiritual. The Catholic doctrine was forced on a people who worshiped the land, with devastating consequences.
If this is the new place of religious or political power, what happens to places like Kuelap?
It's likely that Kuelap was abandoned and that the people were brought to reducciones such as this one.
So once the reducciones were in full power, places like Kuelap were abandoned. This was the new spiritual center. What's interesting is that comparing this small stone building with the grandiose stonework of Kuelap, you would think that there's no way this could influence the culture so significantly. And yet this was one of the final blows to the Chachapoya.
In a progressive way, yes. It wasn't an instant thing.
The Chachapoya's connection to their sacred land that they revered and fought bravely to protect was severed. They had lost their homeland and their religion. The few that did not perish in the reducciones fled, and the Chachapoya civilization dissipated and crumbled.
I was looking for a decisive point at which the Chachapoya culture disappears or is significantly diminished, but it sounds like it's more of a gradual progression. And certainly ripping them out of their ancestral sites, like Kuelap, forcing them to come to these reductions, these small villages, and then making them basically have a whole new god. All of these together with disease, with the Spanish influence, was the end of the Chachapoya.
Sí, esto fue el final.
Many factors contributed to the decline of the Chachapoya. The Inca Empire, the Spanish conquistadors, and there's no underestimating the impact of old world diseases. But moving the Chachapoya to places like Levanto, ripping them away from their sacred sites like Kuelap, forcing them to abandon their ancestors, ultimately was the final blow for the Chachapoya civilization.
But while the culture has long since vanished, their legacy lives on as archaeologists continue to uncover answers that reveal the true story of the Chachapoya.